funky jazz to parade your snares on your vibrant stereo. Bragging that you know how the niggas feel cold and the sun's got so much so. It's time to taste what you most fear. Right, God will not help you here. Brace yourself, my dear. Brace yourself, my dear. It's a holiday in Cambodia. It's tough, kid, but it's life. It's a holiday in Cambodia. Don't forget to pack a wife. You're a star, Bill, a snitch, you suck like a leech. You want everyone to act like you. Kiss ass while you bitch so you can get rich, but your boss can switch her off you. Well, you'll work harder with a gun in your back for a bowl of rice a day. Slave for soldiers till you starve and your head is skewered on a stake. Now you can go where people are one. Now you can go where they get things done. What you need, my son? What you need, my son? It's a holiday in Cambodia where people dress in black. Need a holiday in Cambodia where no gets ass like a rag.
Hey guys, this is Johnny here. Threcast episode, I don't even remember. I'm with this guy on my forum named Evergreen, and I thought we would have a little chat. So, how are you doing, Mr. Evergreen?
Pretty good. Good to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks for
how long
having
have
me
you
on.
been on the forum?
Like a week, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Um
pretty new.
yeah, how are you liking it so far?
It's a pretty interesting place.
Yeah,
Uh, I've spoken about how I'm generally very suspicious of forums. Uh, they tend to be very sort of cliquish. You know,
yes.
they're very
Yes.
sort of an outdated type of social media. They used to be. I remember they used to be very big in the 2000s. I've been on the internet since around the year 2000, and forums used to be very big until Facebook and social media came around.
Yeah, I
And since
agree.
then, they've kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with forums, especially nowadays, is that they're all just Reddit clones. You know, they're all just like these very like they're these places where you're always walking on eggshells, and at some point you just kind of get sick of them and you just leave. Like I could not stand the people on Agora Road. I could not stand the people on all any of these forums. They're just so annoying. It's always like a very small group of people that like ruins it for everyone.
Yeah, I've spoken about this in that thread that you made. That the issue with a lot of forums is that over time they seem to be taken over by certain group of power users, people who use the forum a lot, and they tend to like dominate the conversation. And anybody who's more of a lurker tends to feel left out and eventually just leaves. So it just
Yeah.
becomes the sort of community that's dominated by a handful of people who post a lot. And yeah,
Yeah, and
I
like and it's kind of a difficult situation because on one hand you want to have free speech on your forum, but if you do have free speech then it turns into Reddit. So,
well,
or
Reddit doesn't exactly have free speech, does it? They're
that's
pretty
true.
heavily moderated over there.
That's true, but I do think that these sites like Agora Road or chuds.life, they like, I like the idea, but they always devolve into like Reddit behavior. And so I don't think it's the
Hmm.
moderation that causes Reddit. I think it's just the simple fact that like every single comment that you write is like getting judged. Like you get like little reacts on like every single little comment that you make. Can you imagine having a conversation in real life and like people are like silently like grading, your
Yeah, giving
comment?
you a
Like
little
that's
like upvotes or downvotes or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, I
you would
mean it would
become very self conscious very quickly.
yeah, you just stop talking to people. And so I've kind of made the unpopular decision of forcing people to get along and kind of stopping that kind of behavior because like the only alternative is to like make everyone anonymous like on 4chan, but it's just you'd like to be able to like follow someone's work, you'd like to be able to develop relationships with people and you can't really do that on 4chan.
Hmm. But I think 4chan, it's interesting that 4chan has endured for as long as it has. It's been around for well over 20 years now. And I think that's the appeal of 4chan, that it is a sort of like just this giant room that everybody's screaming in.
Yeah,
And but the fact that nobody really has an identity, that everyone's a lurker basically, I think that's appealing to a lot of people.
yeah,
Makes it impossible for any cliques to kind of develop.
yeah,
Everyone's kind of on
absolutely.
a level ground. Yeah.
And it was probably like a reaction to a lot of the forums that existed. I know the original creator of 4chan, he used to use the Something Awful forums and he actually
Yeah.
got banned from it.
I got
So
banned from that forum a number of times myself. Yeah, that's a very sort of, it's become a very leftist forum. Something Awful has. I've been banned for ridiculous reasons, simply having an opinion, a very
yeah,
mild opinion. It's
maybe
absurd.
I just had a thought. Maybe the reason why these kinds of places eventually turn leftist is because leftists can kind of just put up with a lot of garbage. And so like like the more garbage there is on the forum, like the more you get those kinds of people sticking around. Um
Yeah, it is a. It's also a certain type of personality that that becomes chronically online. There's a certain type of Reddit mod personality, a kind of person who just, who loves being on the internet and moderate people,
yeah.
who gets a sort of a feeling of power from that, who just loves banning people,
Yeah.
who gets a fucking an erection from hitting that ban button.
Mhm. How'd you find Briar Fray?
I think on Twitter somewhere. I think you posted a link on Twitter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I my latest um technique for getting people on the forum is to like aim for like viral posts on X and then underneath them if I can get it a little bit viral then I'll drop the link under it. And that's been a
Yeah.
lot more successful than advertising on 4chan. On on 4chan like I've had like maybe like less than 10 people after spending like close to like $200 in ads. It doesn't really work. You really have to like make something viral and then just put something underneath it.
Yeah.
So and another thing, I I had to remove reactions because as I've said before, I don't like reactions. I don't like people getting judged on everything. So it creates this odd situation where if you want to like react to someone, you really can't. You have to like reply to them with like like an emoji or something. Um, I've been
I
trying to
do like
think.
the sort
Yeah,
of I like the sort of freewheeling type of chat room feeling it has. Your forum, I mean, where you can just post whatever. A lot of forums, usually when people post in a forum, you feel like you have to like compose a very sort of a sophisticated, well thought out post. But this one feels more like you're just kind of chatting, which I like. It
yeah.
gives you a little more freedom to think and just just throw random thoughts out, kind of like Twitter.
Yeah, I'm a really chaotic person, and I like to study in a very eclectic manner. Like I don't like methodically read the entire canon of a school of thought. Like I go from like one thing that interests me to the next. And so I kind of wanted a space where you know, you could improvise more, you know, like let's say you have like a really interesting thought about Japan. You could create a Japanese psychology thread, like the one that's on Briar Fray. And,
Mhm.
you know, whenever you have another interesting thought about it, you could go back there and just drop another thought in there. And so
Yeah.
it's you're sort of treating the thread like a journal. Um, I thought that was an interesting idea.
Yeah, you really have to cultivate a certain type of culture in any social media site, and it just takes a lot of work. But yeah,
Yeah, and
if you show people that this is how we do things here, I think generally they will fall in line and understand it. This is like a certain type of website, and so there's a certain way to behave here. And as long as you get involved and cultivate a certain attitude, I think it will all work out and become a pretty
yeah,
good website.
yeah, and another thing that I really want for the site, and I think this is what's going to turn it into like a really rock star site, is text to speech. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to implement this, but this website has to have text to speech and like really good text to speech. Um, because there, you know, people write walls of text, and I don't always have time to read it immediately. I'd rather just like, you know, select a few posts and then press a button, and then I could just listen to the entire conversation, or even just a section of a conversation. Um, so that's definitely going to be implemented on the website. Um, it,
Have you considered making just voice chats a bigger part of the website? Just organizing some kind of a thing on Telegram or wherever, or on Twitter?
the thing is, I really want the site to be like easy to archive. So
Mm,
I've like for instance, I make people embed images instead of uploading them, because I want the file size of the actual site when it gets archived to be, you know, a lot smaller. Um,
mm.
and so I'd rather like, you know, kind of do it like I keep it as minimal as I can while also adding as many features as I can.
What's
Um,
the purpose of this archiving?
well, because I really want to preserve people's thoughts for posterity. Because you know, the way I see it, there are so many interesting thinkers and original ideas, and I really want to preserve them. Like I want it to be a space where people can really feel like they can change the world, like they can really make a difference. That they don't really have to be an expert or, you know, like an academic to be an intellectual, and you know, influence online culture.
The thing about the internet is, I've always felt that websites like 4chan and Twitter have always sort of symbolized the overall nature of the internet. And the internet is a place where, despite the fact that it's become easier than ever to store data over a long period of time, most of everything that's ever posted is never seen again past a few days after it's been posted. Right? Anything
Yeah,
that's ever posted, it's like it's there for a day and then everybody forgets about it. If you
yeah,
don't
I
read it the
agree.
day it's published, then it becomes history. It just disappears into the void.
Hmm.
So it's always kind of thing that's always something that's happening in the moment. You
Yeah.
get the thought out, maybe somebody will read it, and after that, you just start over. You create a new thought or new
Yeah.
tweet or whatever. So
I-
I don't know about archiving. I mean, I'm not saying don't archive, but uh, it might be futile. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just gonna try anyways because I mean, the site is really like a treasure trove of information. Like you can find like the most obscure and esoteric stuff on the internet here, and
Hmm.
they're just like there are so many rabbit holes that you can go down that I think anyone that goes through the archive is going to have a lot to look at. Um,
Yeah. All right.
so hopefully something comes out of this. But obviously, most ideas, most posts are never read again, and it's only like a small number that um, become a part of internet culture. Like on Agora Road, that's I believe where the dead internet theory came from. Um,
Hmm.
I suspect in the future, there might be some influential ideas that come off the forum. So, but my ultimate goal with this place is I really want it to be like the internet's intellectual space where people that have like really small YouTube channels, like or really small blogs, they can't really find any. They can't get any readers for it. Um, this is where they go to post their channels. This is where they go to sort of create an intellectual milieu, create an organic community, because social media, sites like X, they're very deracinated. They're very atomized. There's not really a culture there. Um, it's
Yeah, it's a lot
it's
like 4chan in that way.
yeah, it's like on early YouTube. There was an intellectual space. There was an intellectual community that was very organic, and you'd have different channels responding to each other and sort of um, moving the idea from one place to the next to the next. That's what I really want for this site.
Yeah, I've been on YouTube since 2006, and I remember when video responses were a thing,
Yeah.
where every video would have like people's video responses posted underneath it, and you could sort of create a chain where you'd have one video responding to another video, which would get its own responses, and so on and so forth. But that thing it disappeared once YouTube became really big, and it became kind of impossible. It would become too cluttered if every video had a bunch of responses to it. But that was a that period from 2006 to 2008 on YouTube was very interesting. That was around the
Yeah.
time when vlogging really became a thing,
Hmm.
where the entire concept of somebody just pointing a camera at their face and just talking about whatever comes to their minds, that was a very original thing back then. It was
Yeah.
something pretty much revolutionary, basically.
And the thing
And
is, like,
yeah,
it's the most interesting content online, honestly. Like all these
yeah,
little tiny channels, like these channels have like 60 views, and it's like some really autistic guy giving like a really wild take on something. Like I love that, you know. And
yeah,
part of the reason why I created a wiki, um, it's not I have hardly added anything to the wiki, but over time people will chronicle the history of this website, and it'll become more enracinated. It'll become more it'll become more like sort of like you feel like you're a part of something larger than yourself. Kind of like the Minecraft server 2b2t, where it's just so old and it's become so organic that it has its own history and culture, and
hmm,
there's it just makes it 1,000 times more interesting.
yeah.
So the longer the site is online, I think the more interesting it'll become.
How long has this forum been up so far?
I think it's been up for about 2 years. Um, When it first
long
started,
time.
I had like just me and Zenitsu. We were like the only ones that would post there. Um, we've been friends for a very long time, so I really appreciate him helping me keep the server online.
So it's becoming more popular recently. You're saying?
Oh yeah, I because it's kind of like a snowball where it slowly gets bigger over time. Like most of the users that join don't really like post or anything, but what happens is over time you slowly get like power users, and
Hmm.
people like Indigo Wizard that like post all the time. I've known
Yeah.
Indigo Wizard for a very long time. We've known each other since like 2018 or something. Um, he's a really funny guy. He posts like a lot of these like funny, like furry, these like angry YouTube comments where he's like ranting at people on YouTube.
It would be interesting if you got like every single user on your forum to participate in this podcast. Give
Yeah,
them their
yeah. I
turn
mean,
to speak.
I bet at some point I'll have interviewed everyone. Um, what do you call it? Tell me more about your politics.
Well, I try to not pay too much attention to politics these days. There is actually a specific subject I wanted to talk about on
Okay.
here, and that is public transit. I'm a big advocate of public transit. It's a largely leftist issue because I think they see it as a sort of a socialist institution, and they might be right about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to talk about that and the concept of anarcho tyranny. Have you
Okay.
heard about this?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I've lived for many years. I lived in Toronto, Canada. I have since left, and I live in Europe now. And Toronto is a city that it desperately wants to be like New York,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always had a reputation for being a very having very awful traffic and a very mediocre transit system. And they've been investing billions and billions of dollars to improve their transit system. And this is a good idea, of course. I believe that you need a good and effective transit system if you want to have like a functioning modern city. I think it is important.
Yeah, I agree.
But I found it strange the way leftists in general approach the subject of public transit.
Yeah,
They
they're
of course they always advocate pumping large sums of money into it, but it is also always a place full of just it seems like in North America in particular, every public transit system is just a symbol of the city's dysfunction. It's always
mm-hmm.
full of homeless, lunatics, and every kind of person. And this is something that in Toronto in particular has become noticeably worse in just the last few years. Uh,
Yeah.
I used to ride a public transit system there a lot when I was young. When I went to school and when I worked, I would ride the subway every day, basically. And it was, you would have your occasional crazy person and those types, but for the most part, it was fine. You could ride the system safely and nobody would bother you. But
Mm-hmm.
in the last few years, there's been this increasing phenomenon. I don't know if you've ever come across this, but when sometimes you'll see a person who will come onto a bus or a train and they'll have their speaker with them and they
Yeah.
play their music. Have you ever
It's like,
experienced this?
well, I don't take public transport, but or public transit, but in the bathroom at work, you have all the Indians. They walk in and they blast their music. Or like when I'm in the cafeteria, you got the Spanish people. They've got their TikTok on, and
Yeah.
they're not supposed to do that. But I
Well,
actually
that's
got
not that's
a
not quite as bad. The issue with these, oh, sorry, like you finish your thought. Go ahead
oh
before
yeah,
I interrupt.
I actually got a pair of headphones or earmuffs. So whenever I go out to the cafeteria, I put on the earmuffs and I don't have to hear them.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But But what I'm specifically talking about is a kind of person who is, when somebody steps onto a train with a speaker and starts playing their music, the reason they're doing that is not because they just want to listen to the music. The reason they're doing that is to deliberately be a nuisance to the other people on the bus. This is some
Hmm.
kind of a specific, deliberate antisocial behavior.
Yeah, we're definitely on the same page about this. I was actually telling my friend Eris about this the other day, or not the other day. It was like a few weeks ago. I told her, if you ever see someone like um basically like making a scene or doing something like that, it's because they want an excuse to start a fight.
Yeah, there was an incident in Toronto a few years ago. There's this video on YouTube of like two people who got into a fight. It's a white guy versus a black guy. This black person was came in with a speaker playing music, and this other person started fighting him. And after they exchanged a few punches, the man with the speaker pulled out a knife and stabbed the other guy like a dozen times. And it's a
Oh,
very terrible video. You can find it on YouTube. It's awful. You can hear the guy screaming.
something like that
He's
happened. My dad, like earlier this year, he got into a fight with a guy on a train. It was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, some mystery meat or something. He was like trying to harass people, and my dad like told him to like f off, and they basically like wrestled each other on the ground.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so my dad's
Hmm.
okay though.
Oh,
My
that's
dad,
good.
I don't know what that guy was thinking because my dad is like really strong. Like he's a mechanic, so he can
Yeah.
just he's just all day just like twisting bolts and stuff that are like really really tough. Um,
Yeah, but of
but
course, the thing that happens is every once in a while, one of these people has a knife on him, and he just starts stabbing.
yeah,
So this
it's
is
not
why most
smart
people
to.
just, most people will try and avoid this kind of confrontation. It's very good that your dad actually did something about that, but you
Yeah, I
know,
mean,
the
I've
number
kind
of
of.
crazy people, the number of these types of people is infinite. So you fight one, there's gonna be another one the next day,
Yeah, you
and you
got to
can't
have
fight
some
all of
sort
them.
of honestly, with these kinds of people, you just fight dirty with them. You just like you use like defendu, like you know gutter fighting, or you just carry a weapon on you. Honestly, just carry like I know it's like illegal to carry a slingshot, but I know someone that does. I would never do such a thing. Um,
Yeah, I have two stories actually that I wanted to talk about in coming across these kinds of people. And again, this is this type of thing that I used to ride the subway in Toronto every single day when I was in like the early 2010s. And this
mhm,
is something that just never happened. I never came across anything like this. And in the last few years, these days, I would ride the subway much less, very rarely, maybe like a dozen times a year.
mhm,
And despite that, in those times, I came across like three or four incidents of somebody playing music. It's now, for some reason, in just the last few years, it's become a regular thing.
mhm,
And there's two particular stories that I wanted to tell. First one was on a bus. This was in northern part of Toronto. It was on a, I don't know if any of your listeners live there. It was on the Viva Blue line, and
mhm.
there's this black guy who had like a small child, a toddler with him, and he was playing
Mhm.
his music. And it was very obvious that the reason he had his kid with him is because nobody would ever mess with, with a guy who has a child.
Yeah.
So he had a kid and he was playing his music, which was kind of sad that, a child has that kind of a father. And some people would try and argue with him and tell him to like turn your fucking music off, and he would insult them in return. It was just a sad situation.
Yeah.
I just felt really bad for the kid in particular, and it was just really embarrassing. And the
Mhm.
second instance was also on the exact same bus line. This time it involved some kind of an Asian guy, a young, very skinny Asian kid who was sort of dressed like a goth, I guess. He had these skull rings on his hands, and he was playing some kind of a song that was exceptionally repulsive. One
Yeah.
of the lyrics was something like "shove that cross up your ass" or something like that. He was like
Oh.
really playing just some nasty, nasty type of music.
Hmm.
And then this guy was just like so skinny. Like, well, he had like, and it was a completely packed bus full of people, and he was playing this music. And at the time, as I was working up these sort of enthusiasm to say something to this guy, I saw sitting right across from me was this construction worker who, he had his helmet with him and everything, so he was obviously coming home from a shift. He was this Latino looking man, and he had this enormous oversized cross hanging around his
Oh,
neck, like this
uh-oh.
ridiculously big Christian cross. Like it was so big, like it must have been uncomfortable to wear all day. It was, but anyway,
Yeah.
he was sitting there, and I was just, and he was very big. He looked like he could like snap this kid in half with ease. Right? He's a construction worker. And I was sitting there, I was thinking like, you know what? I'll let this guy, maybe he'll do something, so I don't have to. And
Hmm.
what I saw was he kind of looked at this kid. He rolled his eyes. He was clearly upset. And then he took his giant oversized cross and he hid it underneath his shirt, and that
Yeah.
was it.
Oh.
And that was very strange because I
I
was
guess he got I guess he
ex-
got intimidated. This bad
yeah.
this badass Asian
Again,
kid.
this guy was like no doubt weighed twice as much as this
Yeah.
retarded kid playing his music, and he, for some reason, he decided to hide his cross. I mean, what is,
Interesting.
anyway? And in the end, I ended up getting up and I told this kid to turn off his music, and he did
Hmm.
after a little bit of arguing. And the reason I remember this story is just this. I just found it very strange how this man who had this cartoonishly big cross hang around his neck. I imagine he wears it at work all day. And
Hmm.
he just, I mean, if you're that much of a believer in God, if you're a Christian, which I am as well,
Yeah.
and then like when the time comes to kind of be a little brave, you instead, without any prompting whatsoever, he just put the cross away and he hid it. Like nobody intimidated him, nobody threatened him. It was very
Honestly,
strange.
I think it's smart though. I mean, we don't I mean, I do don't get me wrong. I think when the time comes, you know, all these people will drag them out on the streets and, beat these people to a pulp. But until then, there's you got to remember these people aren't very bright. These people don't have anything going on upstairs. They're retarded. So I just ignore them. I just stay away from them. I don't it doesn't make me angry because they're just not very bright. They're not
Yeah.
they don't know what they're doing.
I was just a little bit disappointed in this guy. What was
Yeah.
like nobody he decided to do that on his, like, nobody threatened him, right? He was in,
Yeah.
why did he hide the cross? I don't get that. It was very weird and a little bit disappointing.
I see.
Well, anyway, yeah, those are my two stories. But yeah, I brought up the subject of anarcho tyranny. And I mean, this is the issue with public transit, particularly in North America.
Hmm.
Because where I live right now I live in Estonia, which is a very nice place. And the big difference between the capital city here, Tallinn, and Toronto is that the public transit system here is not only free, but it's also very pleasant.
Yeah.
And it is a very different experience when you're riding with a lot of, in a bus full of entirely white people
Hmm.
versus a bus where there's something about riding the bus in North America. It's not, the bus is maybe the same, like it's the same, it's a
Yeah.
vehicle, it's the same technology. You just sit it and sit inside of it, and it takes you from point A to point B.
Hmm.
But there's something about riding a bus in some places like Toronto where you sit there and you just feel like a loser. You know,
Yeah.
riding the bus, you feel like you feel like a loser.
Yeah.
You don't
Absolutely. I
feel
I
that in
agree.
some place like in Estonia where the public transit system is nice. You feel like a normal person because everybody rides the bus here, and
Hmm.
the system is clean and people behave themselves. You just feel better when you're surrounded by mostly white people who behave properly, who dress well, and and
Yeah.
so on. But when you're sitting, I've had this, this experience countless times where you're sitting in a bus full of people, and some of them are eating like really smelly food, and some of them are playing their music or whatever, or talking on the phone too loudly, and there's just, and every single, sometimes you're like the only white person on the entire bus,
Mm-hmm.
and it just feels so isolating, and you're just
Yeah.
wondering like, what am I even doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And like any person who ever like finds it, this is why like everybody drives in North America, right? Because riding the bus is just,
That's part of the reason.
yeah,
The other
it's
the
just
other
such an
reason
unpleasant experience.
the other reason is because of lobbying by car manufacturers. So they wanted it to be car country.
Maybe, but I mean, why do people play music on the bus? Why does this keep happening? Why do people get stabbed? I mean, I feel like most of these problems could easily be resolved with simple enforcement. Just enforce the law. If you arrest a few people, you can fix this problem pretty quickly. I think the only reason it happens is because the government in charge simply doesn't enforce the law. And recently, Toronto elected this Chinese woman who was just a from the New Democratic Party, who was a complete shitlib. And I think that's probably part of the reason why everything went to hell so quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
But they're just not enforcing the law. It's a deliberate decision, and this is what anarcho tyranny is, which is, it seems like a contradiction in terms, right? You think that
mhm,
anarchy and tyranny, they seem like they mean the opposite thing, because tyranny
mhm.
seems like control, and anarchy is the opposite of control. But when you think
It's
about it, they're really,
selective.
yes, exactly. It is selective. It is tyranny. It's anarchy because you're not enforcing the law, but it's tyranny because the law is being enforced, but against certain people and only specific crimes.
Hmm.
If you yell a racial slur, you will probably get arrested. If you play music on a subway, the police won't do anything until you finally decide to stab somebody.
Hmm.
That's what a narco tyranny is. It creates this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The normal law abiding people are terrified. They don't do anything, and they simply, they're just at the mercy of these people who are,
Yeah, there's nothing they
ready
can
to
do.
snap. Yeah,
Because if you react, then the police are going to arrest you too. So
yeah,
the whole system
and
is
it,
dysfunctional. The only
yeah, and the
way that
reason
you
we,
can,
yeah, the
the,
reason we call it tyranny is because the normal person, the average citizen, is being tyrannized by this sense of fear and unease in being surrounded by, first of all, crazy people, but also by just strange foreigners. Being in a bus full of people who you have no common ground with. Like like Toronto, when I first moved to Toronto, it was about 60%. It was about two-thirds white, maybe around 70% or so, 60 to
Mhm.
70%. And by the time I left, it was, these days it's like maybe a little bit of over a third white.
Yeah.
So, and it's just a city full of foreigners, people who you have absolutely nothing in common with. And of course, these types of problems began to appear because again, the sorts of people who usually try and keep things in line are people like your dad. I'm glad you
Hmm.
brought this up because, you know, because there was a time when if somebody did something like this, they'd get their ass kicked. But
Yeah, there was.
nowadays,
Um,
yeah,
Nowadays, there's the government just has a lot more control. I mean, I think it's just kind of inevitable given what de Juvenal said about power, that systems over time they try to grasp for more and more power, and so there's more surveillance. There's a much more sophisticated um, police system, but at the same time, they're also just really incompetent, and they're also like really biased, and they also have all of these delusional communal fantasies, um, where they're trying to make a civilization act more like a commune, which is just a completely
mhm,
different system. That's the
yeah,
reason why leftists are so obsessed with things like public transport and little free libraries and vintage and stuff like that. It's because they have a very primitive mindset. They think
Well,
like hunter
to be honest,
gatherers.
man, like again, I do like a lot of those things. I even like the little free libraries. They're kind of nice. I Anytime I see one, I'll stop by and open it up and see what's available. But the issue with them is that all of these things they work only in societies that function. Like you cannot have
Yeah.
public transport if you don't enforce the law and stop. For example, people who avoid paying fares or
Hmm.
people who like play music and things like that. Like this is a strange contradiction that I just don't understand. Like they pretend to want one thing, but then they sabotage those things. They sabotage public transit by simply not enforcing proper behavior, by flooding
Yeah,
the
I mean,
transit system full of like lunatics.
the reason why their politics are so chaotic is simply because um, a commune is just a completely different system from a civilization. They're not trying to create civilization. They're trying to create a tribe. They look at something like, I don't know, squatting, and
Mhm.
their priority, since they're communal thinkers, their priority is to the feelings of the people that are homeless, and they're just trying to like get by and survive. And in their mind, like, the abandoned building or whatever that they're squatting in, like, that doesn't really matter. They shouldn't be arrested for that. But because they have that idea, because that's what they care about, they don't understand second order consequences. They don't, or second order effects. And so they just ignore any reality that contradicts their communal fantasy.
The thing is, like, I'm not sure that the left is trying to create anything at all. Like, it seems like all their behavior only undermines any sort of community, whether it be tribal or civilizational. Like
That's
this thing
true.
about like not enforcing the law, like that doesn't benefit anybody at all. It's like they're deliberately just messing with their own system for no reason. I feel
Well,
like what the left wants is to simply destroy everything.
I think
That's
that
the end result.
the thing is, like, you can't really look at the left as like a set of policy positions. You really have to uncover the code. This is something that Clotaire Rapaille talks about. He has an idea that he calls the culture code. And basically what this is, it's about taking all of the chaos of a culture, all of the stuff that's going on inside of it, and just describing it in as few words as possible. So like he'll look at like Germany, and he'll say the code is order. Or, he'll look at Canada, and he'll say the code is peace. Or look at Japan and say that it's perfection. Well, you can apply the same thing to economic regimes, to political movements, to personalities. For example, I would say that my code is probably chaos. I'm a very chaotic person. I think the code for the left is just commune, and all of their innocuous behaviors, like all of their unconscious drives, center around this theme of um, utopia. Because we evolved to live in a commune. We evolved to live in a tribe, and so the reason why leftist politics are quote unquote utopian is because they're very primitive. They're very savage. Um, and so it's almost like a primitive state of mind. And I wonder to what extent this is influenced by trauma, but it clearly comes from the rise of the middle classes. Because, a leftist is kind of like a clever hillbilly. They're not very sensitive people. They appear sensitive because they're weak and they like art and stuff. But they're not really sensitive. They're not as sensitive as someone like, like Richard Spencer, for example. They they have kind of a warped sense of empathy, where they kind of prefer, rocks and trees to, their own family members. I don't know if you're familiar with the moral circle, but
No.
it seems that when you had the rise of the middle classes, pre Enlightenment, that's when you had all of these smart, low class people. These people that have these very uncivilized behaviors, these uncivilized ideas, and they try to impose their savagery onto civilization. So you get stuff like democracy, which is kind of like a communal way of doing government, and then you get stuff like Marxism and social justice and all that.
Well, I don't know about that because democracy is actually a very sophisticated form of government. Democracy is something that only appears in very developed civilizations like ancient Greece or Rome or our civilization, whereas communism seems like a return to a more primitive state, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I think that democracy, you know what it is? I think when a civilization is successful, then they can afford more communal aspects because you can start, like, when you have your basic needs met, then you can start economizing towards like your true desires. And so you go from um a dictatorship under Caesar to something more leftist, more, you got your free healthcare, you've got this, you got that. But I really see that as decadence. I think that decadence is when a civilization stops um, working as this fixed hierarchical system, this fixed sorting machine, and it starts treating people more fairly and in a more egalitarian manner. And I think that's when it starts to
Spengler
decline.
Spengler talked about this a little bit. Have you read The Decline of the West?
No, I haven't.
Hmm. It's been a years since I've read it, so I might not be remembering it very well. But he basically talked about civilizational cycles and the idea
Oh
that
yeah.
all civilizations seem to have a sort of a cycle from life, from birth to death. And I think he's claims that there have been about seven or so civilizations or
Hmm.
something like that. And of course, our civilization, the European civilization, or the Faustian civilization, as he calls it,
Yeah.
began at around the time of Charlemagne and the Battle of Tours, which happened somewhere in the eighth or ninth century, so over a
Hmm.
thousand years ago now.
Yeah,
And
because like here's what I'm thinking, right? Like when you look at democracy and you look at the kinds of people that run democracy, I mean, even from the very beginning, you go and read Sidney George Fisher, and you kind of get a more unvarnished look at the founding fathers. Like it, the Enlightenment liberals were kind of shabby people, and what happens in democracy is that you get a mixing of the classes. You get the midwits and the poor people. Like over time, it becomes more egalitarian. Those people get more and more access to the presidency. They get more and more access to writing laws and so forth.
yes, well, this is the
You,
reason why I brought up Spengler, is because his point was that this is actually an example of a civilization becoming more sophisticated. Because as he claims is that as a civilization develops and becomes more advanced, eventually over time it begins to adopt some form of liberalism or something that resembles a democracy. It might not
mhm.
specifically be a democracy, but something that decentralizes power. They end up getting rid of kings and enforcing some kind of a system that takes power out of the hands of either a king or any kind of an oligarchy, and makes power into something that's more sort of again decentralized, and gives access to power to a larger number of people. And
Yeah, but
he presents this as a sort of a sophisticated system that does begin to decay over time. And his point is that eventually, as anytime anything like democracy appears, it seems to only last for a couple of centuries before
mhm.
eventually you get a Caesar who comes in, because this democracy eventually sort of accumulates problems that are unresolvable, and eventually this society requires some kind of a figure to rise up, and a Caesar figure who comes in and sort of fixes everything by force. And his
Hmm.
prediction was that eventually the West would get its own Caesar. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but yeah, this democracy thing, it is something that seems to, it's just a part of psych. I mean, you mentioned earlier the issue of hierarchy, and that democracy seems to get rid of hierarchy, and that is kind of the point, right? It is,
Hmm.
as societies develop, eventually they try and get rid of this sort of strict hierarchy and create an
Yeah.
environment where power is more in flux. And I'm not. It's been a while since I've read Spengler, so I don't know if I'm really explaining it well.
What
But
did but like what is it about democracy? Let's just say early democracy. What is it about early democracy that makes it sophisticated?
well, I mean, it is something that only appears, like, you don't get democracy in primitive societies, right? Every single society in pretty much all of human history
I
has been
disagree with
hyper
that.
hierarchical.
You actually do get democracy in more primitive societies. Like for example, you could look at pirates. Pirates were democratic people. You know, they had everybody got a share, everybody got a vote. Like the captain got more shares than the rest, but not by that much. And
Yeah, but
they
the
had stuff
captain,
like
the captain still rules his ship with an iron fist, right?
no, it was a lot more communal than you think, and they had things like healthcare. They had they had like a lot of almost leftist kind of uh, you know benefits that came with being a pirate.
Mm.
Being a pirate was a lot more. Um, it's often been said that being a pirate was a lot more comfortable than being a merchant because on a merchant it was a much more exploitative system, whereas on a pirate ship it was kind of communist, and it actually worked because it was a very small number of people. It was like a crew only had like 140 people or something like that, or however many it was, and so that kind of system can actually work there. The problem is scaling because once you get past like 140 people or so, then you need a market to step in and sort of make people trade fairly and so forth.
Yeah, well, a pirate ship is ultimately a group of outlaws. It's not quite a civilization, right?
It's
When you
not.
talk about a large scale civilization or any kind of like a nation or an empire, those things have historically been pretty authoritarian and pretty
Hmm.
right wing.
Yeah,
democracy
civilization.
seems to only Democracy seems to be something that has only appeared a small number of times historically, and again always appeared in societies that have become quite developed, such as Greece or ancient Rome.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, I think it's just when a civilization decides to organize its government more in the way that like a commune would, and what happens is that um, it becomes a less sophisticated system, like right out of the gate. It allows like people that don't really have good breeding, people that aren't really sensitive. It allows those kinds of people to rise up and sort of create like a mini war inside of the country where like one half of the country hates the other half, and like for example, if like leftists like art funding and they want to do some more art funding, the conservatives will go, "Oh, well, I'm against art funding. I'm going to cut art funding." And so it's really childish. Like one side will become against whatever the other side is for, right? If one side is like more racial than the other side, well, then the other side will become anti-racist. Um,
Mhm.
and that's very dysfunctional. Over time that leads to this very pathological situation where one side wants to keep the civilization going and the other side wants to destroy it. So I think it really inflames that. I think that communal tendency becomes more and more pronounced over time, especially with the antagonism.
Yeah, my main issue with democracy is that it tends to drag normal people into fights that they should not be participating in.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
a lot of the things that like CNN talks about all the time, the average normie should not be thinking about,
Yeah,
let
and
alone having a fucking opinion on.
they're not even cut out for it. They don't know anything about the world. The average person knows nothing about the world.
Yeah.
And yet they still have they're very opinionated on this stuff that they've never studied.
Yes.
And
Yeah, yeah. It does tend to drag people, regular people, into fights that they shouldn't be having. Like,
mhm.
there's no reason why the average person should have opinions about, the vast majority of things that are being argued about every single day. It just creates this atmosphere of discontent and people getting emotional over things that shouldn't matter, like transgenderism or whatever. No.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that I've noticed is that when people get angry, they become narcissists. Like if you've ever like studied narcissistic abuse, like like gaslighting, just like
Yeah.
the cruelty and the really manipulative way that narcissists abuse people. I think what happens is that politics makes people behave narcissistically towards each other, and so you get this like really narcissistic and angry society where it's all about sabotaging the other side. Although, of course, I don't think that conservatives are nearly as bad. Um, but sometimes they'll they'll be really ignorant. They'll pass on stuff like paying off student debt or whatever just because they want to own the libs.
Yeah, the narcissism thing, that's definitely an issue. Uh, it's almost like every single person becomes their own king, right? Everyone has an opinion. Everyone fucking needs to take on, become a part of the fight, have their
Mhm.
own, argument and so on. And it really does make people narcissistic, that's for sure. It's
Yeah,
very unpleasant.
I'm just really curious what could really replace democracy, though. I mean, obviously, it's going to be some sort of centralized government, but if it's a centralized government that's run by peons, it's not really going to work out because I don't know if you've ever interacted with the average conservative. They just don't really have anything going on upstairs. I mean, you look at these people that run the Republican Party, they're just really mediocre people. And they're always 10 years behind. They're always um what is it that Richard Spencer said? He said conservatives are just 10 years behind. And it's so true, and they're just starting to make talking points that we were making back in 2014.
And I
It's
just find it
it's
funny that you're bringing up Richard Spencer. I haven't heard of that guy in like 10 years.
yeah.
Didn't he vote for Biden? He was like a
Oh yeah,
big Biden shill.
he's I don't know what his deal is. I have no idea. I've been listening to him for so long. I have no idea what his politics are. Honestly,
Yeah, the
like
guy has
I don't.
lost his mind as far as from what I've heard.
Yeah, he's kind
Yeah,
of he's a pretty
yeah, he
funny
hasn't been
guy though.
relevant in 10 years, so he hasn't been
Mhm.
relevant in a very long time. So I don't know.
He
Doesn't really
really
matter,
likes
does it?
James Bond.
Hmm.
He's like totally obsessed with James Bond, and he talks about him all the time. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not really. Yeah, I think I've said everything I was planning on saying.
All right. Well, it
It
was
was a
nice
very
talking to
interesting
you.
talk. Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. You're welcome. And guys, be sure to check out Briar Fray. Link is in the description. You guys have a lovely day. All right.